This is the morning of the 25th of April. Clip on MS Now titled, "The Wheels Are Coming Off. Trump already less popular than after January the 6th. Let's listen to this clip. Plays for 9 minutes and 48 seconds.
Donald Trump digs the country deeper and deeper into his mess. And in the last hour, we learned that the Secretary of the Navy, a guy named John Phelan, has been fired by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, in, we must note, the midst of a war that has not ended. A war to which we have directed an enormous number of our naval assets to the theater in nearby Iran. According to the Pentagon, we are conducting an active naval blockade there as I speak to you this evening. And this firing, of course, comes just 3 weeks after the Army Chief of Staff was also fired. Senator Mark Kelly, who spent a quarter century in the Navy, will join me with his reaction later in the hour. This firing comes at the tail end of what has been a truly awful 24 hours for Donald Trump, even grading on a curve for what has been, generally speaking, a pretty rough year for this president. Trump had an absolutely brutal day yesterday. It was one of those days that can sometimes, in hindsight, look like a kind of political inflection point. Over the past couple of days, he's had just a series of horrendous polls showing that the number of people who support Donald Trump, the president of these United States, is getting smaller day by day by day. It's 800.
Yeah.
The most favorable of the surveys to the president was from The Economist and YouGov, showing Trump with a 38% approval rating. That was as good as it got. And as we often say on the show, when the favorability numbers begin regularly starting with a 3, that's when the wheels start coming off the whole political project. NBC News SurveyMonkey had the second best numbers for Trump, with his approval hovering at 37%, although in that same poll, half of all respondents said they strongly disapproved of the job he's doing. Reuters Ipsos had its own poll showing Trump at 36% approval. That puts it somewhere in the middle of the results we got. Angus Reid Global and Verisight both showed something similar, with Trump at 35% approval. The Associated Press, NRRC, had Trump even lower at 33%, meaning just 1/3 of voters are on board with the president's agenda. And rounding out the bottom, an ARG poll with Trump at 32% approval. That's all within the last 24 hours. Now, 32%, that's the outlier of this group. It's the lowest. But, I mean, there's clearly a trend here, right? All the numbers in the 30 range. Right now, it's a losing streak rivaled only by the New York Mets. Sorry, Mets fans, I love you. You get the point. People are unhappy. And just for comparison, at the lowest point of Trump's popularity during his first term, we had to look this up today, in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, you remember that, right? His approval rating was 34%, which means, according to some polls, he's already right now less popular than when he led a violent insurrectionist mob to try and overturn the results of the election he lost and refused to call the mob off for hours. Even if you trust the rosiest assessments of his presidency, he is rapidly approaching that point. I gotta say, the situation is starting to begin to look a little George W. Bush-like in the lame duck period of his second term, after he launched two disastrous wars, when the previous president's approval ratings started to dip into the mid to high 20s. I'm not sure if something like that's even possible, to be honest, in our current polarized environment. I thought the floor was around 38 or 39. But if things continue on the same track, who knows? There are signs everywhere you look that voters are just plain fed up. According to one new survey, that was the Strength in Numbers Verisight poll I mentioned a moment ago, 55% of the country, a clear majority, supports impeaching the guy. Now, again, these are polls, there's response bias, and there's room for skepticism here. Their polls are not perfect, they're a snapshot in time. We've seen there's been polling error before, once when people were actually doing things like voting. But again, just look at the data in the aggregate. You don't need a graduate degree in political science to see what's happening. Donald Trump was already pretty unpopular, and then he, out of nowhere, with no real explanation, at 3 a.m. with a taped address, started a disastrous war for no discernible reason, which has left more than 6,000 human beings dead, 1 million displaced, and sent gas prices skyrocketing. Right now, they're averaging more than $4 a gallon nationwide. That's up nearly $1 from a year ago. And there's a little sign this problem is going to resolve itself anytime soon. That's the weirdest thing about where we are right now. Trump has essentially no leverage to get Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The United States is still blockading the strait itself. And with the U.S. doing that, Iran has made it clear it will keep it closed. There's reporting today it might take 6 months to clear it, even after they come to some deal, because there's mines in there. And the reality is it's better that we're not in active conflict with them right now, right? That from the ethical, human, financial, strategic costs, the act of war are being eschewed. But there doesn't seem to be any kind of meaningful progress outside of Trump's announcement of an indefinite ceasefire either. There's no talks happening. We're just kind of stuck in this geopolitical holding pattern, a sort of frozen conflict that could switch on at any moment, no end in sight. And it's bad on its own terms, and also people don't like it. The median voter, it seems, is starting to sound a lot like this woman who spoke to a reporter in a very red Pennsylvania town last month.
If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You're a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
We can't get enough of that sound here at All In. We're now also seeing the second order effects of higher gas prices. This is something to really watch. People have been warning about this, right? We've sort of been waiting for this to build with the rapid rate of inflation when it comes to food prices. According to a new analysis from Bloomberg, the cost of food increased nearly 8% year over year just last month. That is a bad result. And certainly not great from the guy who promised to bring down prices of what he calls groceries, a word he thinks he invented, on day one. It does not help Trump's case. He's also constantly posting online like a maniac. And I don't know, are they getting more maniacal or not? They're very long. They're very long. Look at that. Now, to some extent, that kind of thing has always been baked in, right? It's like taken for granted now that no one likes how the guy comports himself online. Who could? A common refrain during the last election from Trump supporters was, mean tweets and cheap gas, as in, we'll take the former if it means we get the latter. But we don't have cheap gas now. It's expensive gas. And very long mean tweets. Very long. To some extent, I think the White House saw this coming, which is why they pulled the emergency ripcord ahead of the November midterms. Trump's plan for surviving all this was this insidious, toxic attempt to rig the election maps in favor of Republicans in states like North Carolina and Texas. But even that didn't work. First, California countered the Texas redistricting plan by having voters overwhelmingly support rewriting their own maps to be more favorable to Democrats to balance out what Texas did. And then just last night, Virginia did the same thing. Unlike in those red states, the voters themselves actually chose to do this. They ratified at the polls to fight fire with fire. And there are some pending legal challenges, specifically a Virginia court trying to block the certification of that referendum. But when all shakes out, we'll see. But it looks likely that Democrats will net 4 new seats when all is said and done. And their message in the closing stretch, they knew what the message that was going to work. It was explicitly anti-Trump. This is the
ad just popped up.
We all knew 4 more years of Trump was trouble, but we couldn't imagine how bad it would really be. Cutting health care and education, firing federal workers, hurting our people, and now Trump is rigging elections so he can hold on to power. Virginia, we can stop him by voting yes in the special election. Yes levels the playing field and stops Trump's power grab. We saw what was coming. Now we need to fight back. Vote yes.
Those ads were effective. It won just by a few points. I mean, it was close. And even after the referendum passed, one particularly outspoken Virginia State Senator, Louise Lucas, centered her victory lap around the president.
If we lose these elections, the House, and in this case the House, and it's going to be a disaster.
And shut your don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my pants, putting souls in fear, making the teams rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, explosion. Overpowering.
Trump himself fought the referendum with an argument that it would lead to his third impeachment. That's the only thing he seems to care about. But the White House has a message for all the Republicans who think Trump didn't do enough to campaign against the new maps. Back off. He's a busy guy.
Why did he choose to campaign more actively against this referendum? Why not spend time on Truth Social encouraging people to vote no before the vote than raise concerns after?
Look, the president has a lot on his plate, a lot on his schedule. He did host a telephone call prior to the election the night before, but he's made his position on the result of this election clear.
Now, the midterms are still a few months away. Trump has nearly 3 years left in his presidency. Anything can happen. I mean, truly. But If yesterday serves as any indication, Trump is in for a rough go of things.
I wonder if, with the scarcity of jet fuel, if he's going to cool flying his fat fucking ass back and forth to Mar-a-Lago from D.C. so he can fucking play golf or sleep in his fucking worthless bed. Huh? The whole travel industry is totally fucked now. The airline industry is going down the drain. Who do we thank for all this? Oh, I know. That little short, fat, dumpy Donald J. Trump. I can't do this alone, folks. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.